Hi, guys. Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here weekly working at simplifying things in our lives one day at a time, one simple step at a time. I'm your host, Michelle Visser, and we talk a lot about how even though it's just one simple step, doesn't mean that it's easy to take the next step. And today's episode, I'm excited because not only am I bringing on a very special guest who's near and dear to my heart, but it's a lot of encouragement towards something that has been difficult for me. For many decades, I never saw any value in strength training. And even when I was working at keeping myself in shape or improving my health by exercising more, strength training was just never on my radar until I don't know, 2, 3 years ago, maybe? Actually, I think now that I think about it, our guest today was integral in me taking it more seriously and really deciding to add some strength training to my days. So, Kai is my son in law. He married my youngest daughter, and he has been encouraging to me in a whole lot of ways. So, today I'm having him on to talk about something that he is truly an expert at, and I am eager to share with you his thoughts on why. Why should all of us be doing something that is strength training in our daily week, in our average week? But don't worry if going to the gym is not something that will ever be you, then Kai has some thoughts for you on that too. And don't worry, no matter what your age, Kai has some thoughts on why strength training is going to improve your life. And if it's something you've just dabbled at, he has thoughts on why you want to be more methodical and um, really, what's the word? Insistent is not the word. You want to be more particular with it. The word is escaping me right now, but um, I think you're going to like the episode and stick with us until the end because I don't know why, but Kai held out until the last 5 or 10 minutes to really share some reasons that you definitely need to consider strength training that you haven't thought of. And near the end, he also gives us insight that I actually had no idea of, encouragement as to why this is something that you should consider taking up no matter what your age. And even if you've never done it before, some really insightful tidbits near the end about that. So the whole episode's good. You're going to love it. Let's dive in. And if you want to reach out to Kai, I can't recommend enough how encouraging he is and how helpful he is at helping somebody understand the value of not only fitness, but even nutrition. And he's great to work with. And I highly suggest you reach out to him. You can reach out to me and I can connect you, or he tells you how to reach out to him. Um, so if, as you listen to this, you're thinking, I need some more encouragement in this area, reach out to him. He is the man to help. Let's bring him on. I want to pause with a quick question for you. Did you know that the ice melt that you can buy at a store that, de-ices your walkways, did you know it's loaded with chemicals that can harm your pets and can definitely destroy any grass or gardens that it touches? I'm excited to tell you, especially with most of our nation pummeled with really bad icy weather this week. I'm excited to tell you that I found an all natural ice melt that I'm really happy about. It's actually been used by road crews for 60 years now, but I'm just finding it myself. It is safe for kids and pets and plants, and thanks to the 64 trace minerals and the 4 complex chlorides in it, which are chemical ions that are found naturally in the salt, this ice melt is effective and all natural. So it's safe for me to use in my sugar bush or anywhere near plants, grass, trees, anything I don't want to see harm with chemicals. In fact, it's actually good for the soil. And bonus, it's not going to hurt any critters that happen to taste some, from the deer to the squirrels to the rabbits that live in our sugar bush to our 3 dogs. Go to soullyrested.com/salt check out this ice melt. You really need some. It's amazingly effective. And I have a special coupon code waiting for you, soulyrested.com/salt. Okay, so today is extremely unusual for me. Um, I have not only a real life, I don't know, it sounds weird to say the word friend because he's also my son in law. So, not only is it a real life person on, but he's married to my daughter. So, welcome, Kai. I'm glad you could come on and talk with us today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here.
So, Kai Hepner is a personal trainer and a sports nutrition coach. So I knew he had a lot of insight he could share with us. And honestly, I don't really spend time picking his brain for myself because I don't know. I just ask him about his own stuff and all the heavy stuff he lifts. But I'm excited because today I'm going to pick his brain for the rest of us, for all of our benefit. I think Kai has a lot of good insights that I think we're going to really enjoy hearing. Or maybe we're not, because maybe you're going to be tough on us and we're going to have to work harder. I don't know.
Yeah,
so
hopefully not.
before I start picking your brain, I want to tell everybody that you do have some titles I want to make sure they know about. Like I said, you really do lift some heavy stuff. Um, Kai is the 2023 America's Strongest Teen. And then in 2024, he is the official Strongman Games World's Strongest Junior. That was fun to watch. You did an amazing job. Tell us tell us about yourself.
Um, yeah, so I've been playing sports my entire life. After I graduated, I got into personal training, and kind of around the same time, I got into strongman. Strongman, for people who don't know, is basically the most unregulated regulated sport there is. So essentially, it's a giant concept of who can pick up whatever random object somebody decided that weighs the most and move it the farthest, the fastest, or the most times. It's everyone. The one that everyone's seen is like world's strongest man with the Atlas stones. So picking up the big
Mhm.
cement balls, setting them on the shelf. That's Centennial Strongman for you. Um, but yeah, so I've been competing actively for like 2 to 3 years now. And yeah, I have one national title, one world title under my belt. And now I'm aging out into the open division, so that's kind of the next thing there. And then the work life, I'm a personal trainer and a strength coach, sports nutritionist. So I essentially teach people how to get stronger, be healthier, maintain better activity, and essentially at the end of the day live longer and be happier. But yeah, so that's me.
I like that. And I like that you pointed out be happier because I think a lot of things really do come down to that. I think if you're going to just do it, I mean, it's okay to do all these things, I think, with certain goals in mind. But in the end, when you realize, wow, life's better, I just feel better, I'm happier, that's a good thing. Very
Hmm.
important.
Yep.
So, okay, before we dive into like the really good stuff, I have a stupid question for you because it's been driving me crazy. I'm going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week and I really want to know, why do you think it is like mainly teens? There are a few 20 something people. And then there's a few, thank goodness, there's a few gray haired older folks, older than me, even, so I feel like I'm not totally out of place, but there's nobody there in my age category. I mean, and
Yeah.
maybe it's the time of day I'm going, maybe it's the gym I go to, or is this something you see too? And do you have a theory why it is?
I think there's definitely a perception bias there. I think there's probably more people than you think, like in your age group, and even a lot older than you that go. Um, but there is definitely a trend of like younger people going to the gym. I think part of that has to do with social media. The gym side of Instagram is huge right now. Same thing on TikTok. So that's like a huge push for everyone. It's like the current peer pressure sport of everyone in high school. So everyone in that
Okay.
in that age range kind of gets picked up and goes with their friends or whatever else. Um, but there is definitely a push now for more people across all age groups to get into the gym. I think a big part of why it's less widespread among the older generations is there was more of like a societal push for it before. So like there were government programs in place for training. There were things like that. There was a lot going on throughout like 60s, 70s, and 80s of like trying to get people more physically fit and active. And then the pendulum swung the other way, and it was like we're not going to do what you tell us to do type of thing. So everyone just kind of fell out of the gym for a while, and
Okay.
there was all the controversy with like steroids and everything like that because like the essentially the leading edge of fitness at that time was like Arnold Schwarzenegger, the bodybuilders, the golden age, all of that. So there was a lot of like unhealthy perceptions associated with fitness in general because fitness in general was
Mhm.
directly related to bodybuilding. So I think now that we've kind of gotten away from that and like fitness and bodybuilding are kind of two separate entities, there's less negative press and associated thoughts that go with it. So I think that hasn't really bled into like my generation and the generation above and below me. So that group has much more positive thoughts associated with the gym than 2, 3 generations before me. But yeah, I
Okay.
think that's really mainly what it is.
Okay. I do think I don't usually think of like what generation I'm in, but I think I'm in Gen X, I think. And I do
Sounds right.
think
Yeah.
that people, yeah, people in my category are very much defying what authority tells us. I mean, that's always the case for every generation, but I do think our generation more than others is like, you know what, that's the way everybody else is doing it. I'm not going to do it that way. So that might be
Hmm.
part of it. And you
Yeah.
said that. Um, and also I think you were hitting on something else I wanted to ask you about that. Well, before we go further, I just want to remind you, Kai, don't let me forget that we have to talk about you don't have to go to the gym to do all these things. Okay. So don't
No,
let
you
me
do not.
forget that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I don't want to just focus on gym, but and that's what we're
Yeah.
talking about now. So, um, how I think, at least for my generation, I know this is the case, but tell me if this is a widespread thought that women don't like this idea of looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And of course, I'm
Yes.
not going to
Yeah.
go to the gym because I don't want to be buff and I want to look, more feminine than that and all that. And I know that that's just going down the wrong trail. So fill me in on all the right stuff there.
So my favorite thing that I like to do is like when I'm training clients in person or I'm taking assessments or anything else. That's a really common thing that I still hear from everyone, like regardless of age group. Of like, well, I don't want to get too like bulky or muscular is like the word people will use. And something I've started doing is I'll have them like because everyone has like someone they want to look like, some celebrity influencer, whatever it is, and I'll be like, hey, like pull somebody up off the internet and like this is your goal physique, right? And I'll have them pull it up. 9 times out of 10, it's a fitness influencer. And usually, fitness influencers at some point in their career have done some type of body fat testing or like DEXA scan, water buoyancy, something that essentially tells you where their body composition is at. And then I'll kind of compare, like, okay, here's where your numbers are at. Here's where this person's numbers are at. 9 times out of 10, the people that people pull for their goal physiques have normally 15 to 30 pounds more muscle mass than they currently have. So I think a lot of
Hmm.
people don't realize that like their goal physique is actually way more quote unquote muscular than they think it is.
Hmm.
The reality of it is like people have different hormones. Men and women have different skeletal structure, things like that. You're never going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger if you go and work out, like no matter how hard you try, even if that's your end goal and everything you've ever wanted. I'm never going to either. Like the average person, even a man with really good genetics who is on like exogenous hormones and steroids and illegal things is probably not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was one in a
Mhm.
million, right?
He just has
Um,
amazing genes, right? Like
yeah, I
he's
mean
just
he's like one of the greatest of all time. Like that'd be like saying, well, I don't want to jump in the pool and swim because I might accidentally beat Michael Phelps in a race, right? Like it's never gonna happen.
That's a
Um,
good analogy.
but
I just
that's
have
the
to
thing, yeah.
interject. I do think one of the first times I met you, you and Seth were sitting around looking at pictures of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm pretty
Of course,
sure.
yeah.
Seth,
He
by the
is
way, for
the
my listeners, is my nephew and Kai's best friend. And I'm pretty sure that's what you guys were doing.
yeah, that does sound
Yeah.
about right. Yeah. That I mean, like if there is another part of like just gym culture and fitness in general, like if you talk to anyone, like at some point everyone has like dipped their toe into the bodybuilding realm. Like that's kind of what gets a lot of people in. And I think that's been true for a long time because like bodybuilding is still the as far as like sports related to fitness go, I think it's still the most popular. It has the most attention around it. So a
Really?
lot of the people, 100%. Yeah, I mean, there's the most money in it
Huh.
too. That's the big thing. But
Oh.
I think bodybuilding is a big draw to the gym, and I think kind of like once people start working out, they either continue down that route or they kind of start to branch out. Like a lot of people get into at least like younger people get into fitness or working out in general for the sake of like I want to be a bodybuilder, and then when they start to realize what's actually involved and the realities of the sport, they tend to shift focus to other things, or they'll realize that they don't actually care too much about that. Because like bodybuilding the sport and having a good physique are two very different things. But that's still
Okay.
definitely like Arnold Schwarzenegger is like the patron saint of kids that get into the gym and want to work out. But
Okay.
yeah,
Well, I will tell you right now, probably not one of my listeners has ever, thought of that. So,
that's okay. Yeah,
um,
it's all right.
so for us, people like me, for ladies anywhere from their 25 all the way up to 65 that are listening to this, define strength training. I mean, obviously this will be a global definition, but define it for us. What is strength training to us that don't want to look like Arnold?
So there's a lot of overlap. Kind of I would say strength training. It's the all rectangles are squares, not all squares are rectangles, not all rectangles are squares. Strength
Mhm.
training is a facet of or more of a category of training, and everything else kind of falls into that in some extent. So like the most basic one is like resistance training, right? That's what everyone knows about in the gym. You're pushing against something that imposes some form of resistance, trying to
Well, that's
progressively
funny
move
because you say
heavier
the word
resistances.
resistance. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think of that at all.
No.
Excuse me. When you say the word resistance, I think of bands. I mean, that's
I
the
mean,
first
yeah,
thing I
that
so I mean
that too. Bands would be correlated in that. Essentially,
Okay.
resistance training is anything where you are trying to move something that imposes a resistance to you, right? So the basic concept
Yep.
is you progressively increase that resistance and you get stronger, right?
Okay.
Um, my kind of broader definition for strength training would be like a bit more of a functional definition. So depending on what you're actually trying to accomplish, I would say strength training is training for the sake of improving your capability to do whatever it is that you want to get better at, right? So
Mhm.
that can be resistance training, that can be explosive training, that can be a million different things, but essentially increasing your capacity to do the things that you have to do in day to day life or for the sake of a sport, depending on what your goals are. Um, yeah. So it's a very,
Yeah.
very broad scope, is essentially what I would say.
Okay. And also for us Gen Xers, it's not just everything we want to be able to do in our daily life now, but we're thinking about what we want to be able to do with our grandkids 10 years from now. And if I'm not working towards that now, I'm not going to be able to get down on the floor and play with my grandkids in 10 years. I know that's
100%.
not a way that Kai is thinking because those of you who are listening and can't see, Kai's a little younger than that.
I will
um,
say that is something that more people should think about. I think one of the things that I kind of got lucky with before I knew what I was doing was that I kind of always like the people that I liked the information I was pulling from them were very big into longevity, and I think more people should think about that. I tell 16-year-olds that come into the gym for an assessment like you need to be thinking about 70 years down the line because legitimately you are young enough that you could realistically still be training in 40, 50, 60 years. And if you start now and you do things the wrong way, your chances of ending up in a really, really bad spot the older you get are significantly worse.
mhm.
I think it's almost safer for someone who's 50 or 60 to train incorrectly than it is for someone who's 16 or 17 because they have so much time to essentially create negative adaptations. So
Mm.
that's my caveat there is like you should no matter what age you are, be thinking about what this is going to be doing for you or to you when you are 70, 80 years old. But yeah.
Very good point. Okay, so you mentioned that when people come in, you ask them, what do you want to look like? And then you've also mentioned that overall strength training, the goal should really be to feel better, happier,
Mhm.
and better, and able to do what you want to do more. Which do you think is more important, or is it different for everybody? Like if you, as a trainer, you want to be motivating people, what
Mhm.
is more motivating? Is it the way I look, or is it the way I feel?
For a lot of people, what's more motivating, at least mentally for them, is the way that they look. And I feel like part of my job as a trainer is to kind of pull people away from that ledge. So I try to
Hmm.
essentially always keep the focus on some type of progression and functional increase outside of simply um, looking like a certain body type or physique. Like I'm always going to prioritize health over physique. With that being said, like there are sports where like temporarily that's not the case, right? If I have someone who is a competitive bodybuilder, is it realistically healthy to be walking around at 3% body fat for an extended period of time? No, but that's not the focus. They're going to get there and then they're going to refeed out, right? So it's like one of those things of it's always it's less about the motivation. It's more about creating a system that continues working after the motivation runs out.
Hmm.
Everybody's going to start really, really motivated most of the time by some aesthetic or physique goal. That's what gets the majority of people into the gym is they don't like the way they look, or sometimes they don't like the way they feel. But for the most part, it is they look in the mirror, they don't like what they see, and they decide they need to do something about it. So kind of that only lasts a certain amount of time. People get into the gym, maybe they start seeing results, maybe they're not doing it correctly and they don't. But long term, that will not do much for you. You're eventually going to hit a point where
Mhm.
either you've achieved what you want to, or you haven't at all. And if you want to continue making progress, you have to keep going. But that motivation is gone. That's not there anymore. And
Mhm.
that's where like my job is to take people's motivation, take all that energy, direct it in the right direction, and kind of show them like, okay, cool, this is what you actually need to be doing so that long term you're maintaining what you truly care about, because a lot of people don't really realize what they want long term. They want to lose 20 pounds, but that actually comes with, they want to live a happy lifestyle, they want to be well liked by the people around them, and they want to be strong and able to move for however many years, right? It always comes back to like they want to maintain their lifestyle as long as they can. But people don't really realize that until they've gotten rid of that first 20 pounds. And then they have to look kind of to the next thing. So that's really what I try to do, is just kind of constantly keep shifting that focus towards what people actually want versus what they think they want short term, and kind of keep them focused on the important things versus just, the next 5 or the next 10 pounds. Right. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. I also think that unless there's someone like you motivating us, or if you're really good at maybe keeping a journal of things, maybe, I don't think we typically realize that we feel better. Does that make sense? I don't think we typically realize, oh, I'm happier, or oh, I'm sleeping better. Like there's a lot of little things that until they kind of add up and roll into a wonderful ball of happiness for us, like we
Hmm.
don't even realize it's happening. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that something I've never asked you this? Is this something that you can kind of help people notice? Do you notice it in people and help them stay motivated
100%.
by pointing out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I will say that there's a million things that get improved. Like sleep quality is a huge one. Energy levels is another really big one. But it really is something that you don't notice until it's gone, and then sometimes you don't even notice that it's gone. So like my example of that is like some people will start working out and then they'll stop, or they'll fall off the wagon and they'll get super super depressed and they'll be tired all the time and not want to do anything. But they never make that connection that, oh, when I was working out I felt better,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think what's interesting is, though, kind of like what you said along the lines of like keeping a journal. The gym is actually a great way to do that. It is the kind of the answer to that its own problem there of the gym gives you a very very good day-to-day measure of how you're feeling, right? Because especially if you're like pushing for some performance oriented goal, because if you go in on a day where you are just not feeling good, the gym will make you realize that very very quickly, right? Like if you've ever trained when you were like starting to get sick, or like when you came back from being sick, or you were on vacation or whatever, you have the worst workout you've ever had in your entire life. Like the very
Mhm.
first time you touch a weight, you're like, yep, I'm not feeling good today, right?
Mhm.
So that's a nice kind of like test day to day to give you an idea of like what's actually happening. And I think like over time, as you build consistency, you'll definitely see those metrics start to improve. But it is a very slow process, and it's something that people don't notice until the years kind of add up. And the same is true. Like it's kind of the same with physique. Like I think people tend to think that the very first time they step into the gym, they're going to gain a bunch of muscle, and I think people feel the same way about their energy levels and their general
Mm.
happiness.
Mhm.
And that's not the way it works. I never realized that I was getting bigger and stronger until I stopped trying to get bigger and focused on getting stronger. And then 3 years later, I was like, oh, I've put on 40, 50 pounds of muscle, because day after day I've just been doing this as part of my routine. And that's really when I started to make progress. Versus when every single day my focus was I need to get bigger. That didn't happen because I just wasn't as consistent. I was giving it everything I had once every, in a blue moon, right? And I think that applies to the emotional and the mental side of things as well. You just need to stack those days over and over and over and keep it consistent, because as soon as you stop being consistent, those results do start to go away. But again, you don't really notice
They
until you
do.
take a moment to think about it. But
They do. But how do you like, do you have any advice for us, especially now in winter in New England? I personally am going through this. Like, what do you tell somebody when they're like, daggone it, it's been like a year and a half now, that I've been doing X, Y, or Z, whatever it is that the person has really been great about doing. And they literally are still having some of the same problems. Like, I mean,
yeah.
what motivates us that, okay, it's going, I know I'm going to get to that point. I know it. Or
Mhm.
I
So
don't know.
there's two things to consider there. Number one is sometimes people's goals start to ignore certain wins because those aren't the ones they're focused on. Um,
Good point.
like I would say a big thing for a lot of people is like, I'll have a lot of clients, or I know a lot of people with like knee pain or whatever else, just like nothing crazy. It doesn't have to be like they had surgery or blew a tendon, but just like
Mhm.
general aches, pains, things like that. And
Yeah.
4 or 5 months in, those will be completely gone, but they'll still be mad at themselves or feeling unmotivated because when they came in, they said their goal was to
Mhm.
whatever it is, do, 135 pound squat, or their goal was to, lose 20 pounds of body fat, and maybe they've only lost 15, which in and of itself is a huge win, and they just don't realize it, right? So they're so
Mhm.
focused on the goal that they don't notice the steps. So I think being very mindful of like day to day how you feel can really be important because you'll start to realize, okay, I feel better, my energy levels are higher, my knees hurt less than they did last week, right? And those are
Yeah.
massive, massive things. I would say honestly, for most people, if we look at it long term over the span of the next 20 years, like for you, would you rather have a 135-pound squat, or would you rather your knees don't hurt when you're 70, right? Like that's a really, really huge thing that people tend to ignore is like
Which is a
having
very
joints.
long ways away, just
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah. Of course,
Really,
you're like
really.
35, yeah. But
Exactly.
yeah, but but genuinely, having pain-free joints is something that people take for granted. Or
Yeah,
if they do currently have pain, they
for
just live
sure.
with it and they don't think of it as something that's actually solvable. But being able
Yeah,
to wake up and go about your day without your body hurting is genuinely amazing.
absolutely. And I think, I mean, you said you hit a lot of nails on the head there with we really need to, if we want to stay motivated with whatever our goal is, whether it's gym related, fitness related, or life related, we have to focus on the positives. I mean, we have to remind ourselves this doesn't hurt. This works. This is going great. And I
Yeah.
talk on the podcast a lot, and I know I mentioned to you the 4-8 attitude idea that we have to have an attitude focusing on what is lovely and positive and true and right and pure. And if we don't, we go so quickly, I do, down that hole
Hmm.
of all the things I still haven't accomplished, daggone it. I'm just gonna give
Yep.
up, right? Why keep
Yeah.
trying?
100%. Yeah.
Um, okay, so I know that you, as a sports nutrition coach and a personal trainer, like, okay, both Kayla and Aiden, who are my daughter and son-in-law, Kai knows that, of course. I'm saying that for the benefit of the listeners.
No, I'm finding
I
this
will
out for the
often go to
first
the
time.
gym with them. I'll go to the gym with them, and Kai actually works with, well, I guess Aiden. Kayla kinda isn't doing that right now, let's see, but Aiden works with him as a personal trainer, and I see what you do for him. To explain to me how that works, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I have like my kind of as the role of like a personal trainer, and especially as a nutrition coach kind of spans a lot. So like I have everything from people who want to be power lifters or competitive athletes in one field or another. I have a Division 1 football player, I have track athletes, and then I have literally 75-year-old grandparents who had knee replacements and want to be able to walk better. And like
Mhm.
that's the range of the spectrum. So I would say that's a pretty in-depth question, because it really does depend on the person that I'm coaching or working with. But essentially, like the basics are similar for everybody. For Aiden, like he wants to gain some muscle, he wants to just improve the physique, the way he feels, everything like that. That at the end of the day really is the simplest form of coaching. Like it's funny because like I feel like that's what people struggle with the most, and that is the easiest to fix. Like if you have a
Mm.
muscle growth and body fat oriented goal, it's so simple to break down. It's just math and doing things the right way for a long time. Um, but that's really what it is. It's for depending on the person, different people need different things. For some people, it's education. For some people, it's they if it's not written down, they won't do it. But basically, my role is to do all of those things for everyone. So I look at what I know is going to be the best for that person and will provide the most efficient results in the best period of time with the least risk of injury and the most positive results. And I'll put all of that into a program that is super easy to follow. And then kind of I think what makes me a little different from some other people is I like to actually educate people on why and how I did that, right? So the example I would give of that is like if I train somebody for 4, 8, 12 weeks, whatever it is, for those 4, 8, or 12 weeks, that program is laid out. They don't have to think about a thing. They just go in and do what it says, right? The form is there, the videos are there, the instructions, everything is there. It's laid out. It's perfect. It's simple. Um, But my goal is
And
that
a
at
lot
the
of
end
times
of that
that's
period,
motivation, right? I'm
100%,
sorry. A
yeah,
lot of
that's
times
yeah.
that is motivation in itself. It's just that it's right there. I just have to do it. There's my
Yeah,
list. Okay.
it is if you wake up in the morning, you're like, "I'm gonna go to the gym," and then you're like, "What am I gonna do when I get there?" And you have no idea, you're a lot, like,
Mhm.
less likely to go than if you're like, "Alright, I'm gonna go and I'm
Mhm.
gonna do this many sets of this and whatever else," right? Um, it just makes it easier when you have boxes to check. But, yeah, again, like, my goal is that when somebody reaches the end of that period, when they've just been doing whatever I quote unquote "tell them to," right? I
Mhm.
want them to actually understand for themselves why I had them do that. So I educate people on essentially how to do it for themselves. I've always said, like, if you're a good personal trainer, people shouldn't need you forever. They should need you for as
Hmm.
long as it takes you to teach them to not need you anymore. That's what separates good coaches from bad coaches.
That's a
Um,
great point. Unless
but yeah,
somebody's independently wealthy and they want you there for motivation, right? But
exactly.
that's a
And
really
like
good point.
even for myself, like I hire a coach when I'm in when I'm prepping
Mm,
for strongman competitions because I know that
right.
like I'm realistically going, there's going to be a point in that prep because it's mentally difficult where I'm going to be like, okay, I don't really feel like pushing myself today. So
Right.
that's where I have someone to be like, nope, go get it done. Right.
Yeah.
And like, could I write my own program? Absolutely. I know plenty to strength coach myself, but like, I don't want to. Like, that really is it. Like,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
motivation of having someone else tell you what to do and like keeping you accountable is huge. But yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, just getting together with a friend, and I think we all know this, but
Hmm.
getting together with a friend on your goals, whether it's your nutritional goals or your exercise goals, or walking once a day, whatever it is, if you have somebody else there, it's a huge motivating factor.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if we can you just give me in a few sentences to really motivate people who are listening? Why is strength training important? Why can I just walk and ride a bike and leave it at that, or just do my cardio? Why is strength training important?
So kind of all the things that we've been talking about that are really great come from strength training, right? So cardio is fantastic. More movement is always a good thing. That has benefits for your hormone levels, your energy levels, your function. Everything across the board gets better when you exercise more. The unique benefit that strength training provides is there's a little bit more adaptation associated there. So your body will actually change more from strength training than it will for most other forms of training. Kind of the way I would describe that is like walking has a very low threshold. There's a point at which like cool, you're walking 20 miles and it's not doing any more for you than it did when you were walking 10 or 2 or half a mile, right? So
Mm,
you'll continue to build endurance, but that's about it. If you want to truly improve like your maximum performance with cardio, you're going to have to run like sprints and run things with weight and climb mountains and do absurd things, right? So like there's a lot that there's a level at which like diminishing returns, right? You're going to eventually run out of a room to grow with certain things, and I
okay.
think
Makes sense.
the ceiling with strength training is way higher. Because as a concept, there's always another movement you can do. You can always make the weight heavier. You can always change the tempo. There's always a way to make it harder. So it's much more progressive, and it's something that you can do way more consistently for a lot longer period of time without as many risks and with much more benefit long term. Someone who has been running their entire life probably hit the best they were ever going to be 5 years ago, right? And they're just
Mm,
now just maintaining. With strength training, you can essentially always continue getting better in some capacity. Um, but
mm,
again, like the real benefit of it is all the things we talked about. There is a greater effect on your sleep quality, your energy levels. There's an absolutely massive effect on joint health and balance and risk of
mm,
injury. Like that is the biggest thing,
mm,
especially for people as they get older. The stronger you are, the longer you are going to live. That's an undeniable fact.
mm.
Like unless you get hit by a car, honestly, if you get hit by a car, you might actually recover a little bit better too. But like that's kind of the thing is like
Mm.
your every single risk factor there is goes down when you have more muscle mass, you have better balance, and you are stronger. And the way that you do that is
Oh,
by strength training. Yeah,
wow.
so that's really what I say. It's
So,
just yeah.
okay, I actually did not know that about if you have more muscle, your balance is going to be better. These two things just naturally go together?
Not necessarily. What
Okay.
I will say is if you strength train correctly, you will have more muscle and your balance will be better. But having more muscle doesn't necessarily make your balance better, and
Okay.
having good balance doesn't make you have more muscle. My example of that would be
Okay. So
people that are
doing
really good at
deadlifts
yoga.
is gonna improve my balance. Is that kind of the idea? Like
It can
doing
to
the
an
different
extent. Um, Yes. So essentially, like proprioception is improved by everything. That's another huge benefit of strength training is learning where your body is in space and knowing how to move better. Because you have to learn patterns and execute them cleanly. So it's
Yeah.
very, very intense on the body control. The kind of the what gets a little more complex, and that's why I said strength training correctly, is there are things that certain exercises are better for than others. So a deadlift is really, really cool because you're in a super, super stable position, and you can essentially just move a lot more weight there than you can in other places. So force production, bone density, muscle mass. That's the idea of a deadlift. When we
Okay.
look at balance, that's where something single leg, like a split squat or a lunge or something like that, can be really, really helpful. So strength training correctly entails that you have a system that includes all of these things and makes you essentially good at as many things as possible that contribute to your day-to-day life, as opposed to just being really, really good in one specific aspect, right? So that's the trap that people fall into of like when you said like having more muscle gives you better balance. The immediate thought is like think of a bodybuilder that's absolutely massive, right? Is their balance good? Probably not, unless they've intentionally tried to work on it.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
kind of the thing there is like if you really hyper specialize into one thing, you will lose out on other things. And a balanced strength training program doesn't hyper specialize. It makes you as good at as many things as possible as you can be, so that when you are trying to just daily function, like getting up and down off the floor, going upstairs, walking, depending on the person, running or jumping, different things like that are all going to be easier, take less of a toll on your joints, and make you feel better.
I want to tell you about some drinks that I've been enjoying this winter that literally make my day. They make me so happy. And I really believe that they have contributed to my health this winter. Haven't had any colds, haven't even had any sniffles. And I'm every day pretty much having at least one of these delicious drinks. One is a copycat Starbucks medicine ball, but without any junk and without any refined sugar. So good for you and so delicious. Another one is called, well, I call it my immunity. TEA, immunity, get it? It's delicious. It's a really unique flavor. I enjoy drinking it both hot and iced. I think I usually have it iced more often, honestly. And it is loaded with botanicals that I really, like I said, have really been keeping me healthy. And I've gotten into chai this winter. I have figured out a delicious blend that I've created that's so good. All of these I want to share with you. And all of them come back to my absolute favorite tea company because even though I'm making these blends myself, I can't grow my own tea. So I'm still sourcing some of the ingredients. I can't grow all of them. Regardless, you guys want this. You really want these recipes. Trust me, there's absolutely zero growing of anything required. And they're so good for you. The Starbucks medicine ball, copycat, the immunity, and my chai blend. Go to soulyrested.com/teas, TEAS, soulyrested.com/teas, and check these delicious drinks out. And hopefully, they're going to help you have a healthier end of the winter as well. I have a question for you. Are you an asparagus fan? I will be honest, even though I very much am now, I really didn't eat asparagus or even really know much about it until I think it was 5 years ago now that I planted my first asparagus plant. It just was nothing I ever even considered growing before. But I will tell you, it is my favorite thing in my garden, I think. That's hard to choose. It's definitely up there. And the reason why is it is ready to eat so early. It gives me food at least 6 to 8 weeks before anything else is ready to eat in my garden. It is a hardy plant, it's pest resistant, and it's perennial, comes back year after year. It's like zero maintenance. If you want to check out my favorite source for asparagus, go to soulyrested.com/seeds. Of course, it's not just limited to asparagus. This is an amazing seed company. You can get all of your seeds for this spring. You can get your live plants as well. And I have a discount code waiting for you. Go to soulyrested.com/seeds, SEEDS. Don't hesitate. Don't even think about it anymore. Just go look and pick out some great things for your garden this year. Soulyrested.com/seeds. Let's get back to the idea of what if people are listening to this and they go, okay, I get it. I should maybe do a little bit of this strength training and get my muscles stronger, but I don't want to get a gym membership. what can you
Cool.
tell
You
us?
don't
How
you
can
don't need one. Um,
Okay.
gyms are a tool. They're very, very helpful. I would say as investments into yourself go, they're probably one of the best ones there are because you can get a gym membership to a Planet Fitness for like $10 a month. And
Yeah,
realistically
true.
speaking, there's not a lot of things that can give you the reward long term that cost that little. Absolutely, you can train at home. You can get a lot done with just your body weight. You can get a ton done with resistance bands and a set of dumbbells. But there are it's not that you can't get stronger at home. It's that it's a lot more convenient to do it when you don't have to set everything up, right? So,
Mhm,
everyone who's ever tried to train with like adjustable dumbbells or resistance bands, like, okay, cool, what do I tie this band around? It doesn't stay under my door when I try to put it, like whatever else. Like, there's a million things, and like that's what gets complicated, and that's just three more things that are in your way before you start training, and that's
yeah.
unmotivating. You go to a gym, everything's set up, it's easily adjustable, it's all accessible. You literally just walk in, get it done, right? So my advice would be, unless it's not an option, going to a gym is usually the easiest and best way to get stronger and stay motivated. And again, it's the lace up your shoes rule, right? Like if you don't feel like going for your walk today, put your shoes on and see if you still don't feel like going. You'll probably just end
Mhm,
up going. When you have to actually go and get in your car and drive to the gym, by the time you get there, you're probably going to work out, right?
mhm,
So it's a good way to keep yourself accountable. But with that being said, the philosophy, the basics are the same for everything, right? Like resistance training makes you stronger, and strength training is the pursuit of getting stronger. Find something that's difficult, progressively make it more and more difficult, and get stronger, right? So whether that's body weight squats or push-ups or anything like that, you can do a million exercises. I think that's one thing that people tend to forget. There's a way to train every single muscle in your body with just your body weight. I think people
mhm.
tend to think that, like, oh, you need a gym to hit certain stabilizers, things like that, and it's just not true. You just have to get a little bit creative sometimes. So yeah, I would say the gym makes it easier, but it's 100% possible without a gym.
Okay. Okay. Before we wrap this up, a lot of my audience either fits this category or listens and shares advice with their mom who fits this category. A lot of my listeners have some extra obstacles we feel because we are either perimenopause or in menopause.
Mhm.
And what could you tell us about, how is strength training going to help us? And are there any things that we need to kind of do differently? Um, I also wonder with the cortisol levels, I know I'm always fighting higher cortisol levels. Am I
Mhm.
making it worse because I'm at the gym and I'm on the elliptical for 20 minutes or, all those questions. I just threw them at you.
Yeah.
Go ahead and answer
So
them.
okay, so cortisol is a fun one. I'll address that first. Essentially, cortisol, it's one of those things where it's similar to like insulin. Like people will always think of cortisol as exclusively a bad thing. And it's not. You have cortisol for a reason, and your cortisol levels being elevated is not necessarily a bad thing. Your cortisol levels being consistently elevated long term is a bad thing. Kind of like what I would assume you're getting at is like when you work out, your cortisol levels do spike a little bit. But typically, what that actually results in is they come back down lower, right? So you, for lack of a better term, effectively burn through some of your daily cortisol, right?
Hmm.
And that can be a really, really good thing because then your sleep is better that night. And the number one thing that affects every single thing that you're talking about right there is sleep quality, right? Like that's the first thing to
Mm,
go whenever things aren't going the way that people want them to go. And the problem is that just creates a downward spiral, right? So for someone who's in menopause and their cortisol levels are higher and their estrogen levels are higher and everything's wrong and in the wrong places of where it used to be, right? The first thing to go away is going to be their sleep. And as soon as their sleep goes away, all those numbers are going to get even crazier, right? So, kind of
mm,
what I would say there is like strength training is a really, really great metronome. It kind of helps your body regulate more than it typically would. So like it's never going to make things worse. I would say the only time that like strength training could potentially make things worse is if you already have like a broken leg or something like that, right? Like there are
mhm,
times when you just need to heal. Outside of that, it is almost always going to speed up the processes or make them easier to navigate, right? So that's kind of the first thing I would say is like strength training will help with cortisol. It will help with hormone levels. It's going to be a great thing. The second thing that I would get into is just the way you frame that question of like the additional obstacles. Um, Usually, what people are talking about with that is going to be body fat storage and just like general recovery and fatigue, right? With the body fat storage thing, your estrogen sensitivity as well as like the total production of it can affect where you store body fat. So that's where menopausal women will tend to store more body fat around the midsection, things like that. But it
Yep.
also kind
When
of
you never
abides.
had before, all of a
Yes,
sudden,
yeah, yeah.
that's where it all goes. It's really crazy.
Yeah. But the good news there is like it still follows all the same laws of body fat, right? So if you lose body fat, maybe your storage will be different, but an overall lower level of body fat will still contribute to less body fat in that midsection, right? And the other thing with that is lower levels of body fat, especially once if your body fat levels are high to begin with, bring you into healthier ranges, and then that helps normalize some of the hormones that are causing that issue in the first place, right? So
Mhm.
essentially, the rule of thumb is just be mindful that what you did when you were 20 might not necessarily work when you're 50, but the concept is going to be the exact same. You're just going to have to play with the numbers, right? So when you were 20, your metabolism is definitely faster than it is when you are 45, 50, whatever else, right?
Mhm.
But that doesn't change the fact that if your protein intake is high and your calorie intake is below your calorie expenditure, your body mass has to decrease from somewhere. That's either going to come from your muscle or your body fat. And if you're strength training, your body's going to be much more likely to pull from your fat stores than your muscle mass, right?
Mhm.
And that's another really big benefit of strength training is just the maintaining of your current muscle mass. Every single person, the older they get, tends to lose a lot of muscle mass. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's pretty shocking, like how much muscle you actually lose every year
Yeah.
past a certain age.
Yeah.
Strength training almost entirely offsets that, which is incredible because that means that when you're 65 years old, your legs still have the support they need to protect your knees, and you're so much less likely to need knee replacements or have arthritis or
Right.
all these other things. Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I say there is like that the the hormone question is like always an interesting one for people because it's something that is very very real, but I feel like it tends to, because it's real, get used as an excuse for some people rather than accepting that okay cool, we have to find a workaround for this. People will be like, well, it's not worth trying, right?
Mm.
And what's interesting is the people that like do try and do things the right way or like have a knowledge of how to do it usually end up being like, oh, it never even affected me because like they didn't even think about it. Because like the same way that you look at like,
Mm.
people don't take note of like all the progress they've made or how they feel on a given day, the same is true
Right.
for negatives, right? Like if you just kind of ignore them and get what you need to get done, maybe your progress is objectively slower than it could have been, but you have no frame of reference for that. So for all you know, you're getting strong as fast as you ever could, right?
Mm.
But that's really what I would say, and especially for people who like don't have a history of training, there's like this tendency to be like, oh well, now that I'm 40, I can't build any muscle or like whatever. Like people, I hear every different age. I've had like 25-year-olds tell me that, oh, I'm done building muscle and I'm looking to maintain, and I'm like, you have 20 more years, right? Um, but that's the thing that I would say is like, bear in mind that if you are, even if you're 60 years old, if you have never resistance trained or you've never trained for the sake of progression or strength in some capacity, you are effectively the same as the 16-year-old who has also never trained, right? Like if you start working out, you are going to get stronger very, very quickly because
Mm.
there's never been any stimulus there, right? So like
Mm.
if you take a 60-year-old who's been training since they were 15, are they going to get stronger? Probably not. They're probably as strong as they already as strong as they ever will be. But if you
Mhm.
take someone who is completely novel to the gym and they've never done anything, they've never performed any manual labor or physical exercise or anything, and you put them on a resistance training protocol, they'll build muscle. Like I promise
Mm.
you, measurably, they will
Mm.
build muscle. And like if you ask somebody, can a 70-year-old put on muscle? They'll probably tell you no, and it's just wrong, right? And I think
Mm.
that's a big thing. Is like that kind of goes the same way. Like age is one, menopause is one, other hormonal disorders, thyroid's a big one. Like everyone is like, oh, like because of this, it's not worth trying.
Mm.
Maybe yes, you will progress slower than somebody else, but you 100% will still progress, right? So I would
Yeah.
say my best advice is give it a shot and at least see if it works, right? Because you're not going to lose anything by going and picking up a few heavy things every once in a while. But yeah,
That could be your life motto. You're
that's
not
pretty
gonna
good.
lose
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
by picking
I
up a
like
few
that.
heavy things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that it's so true. I mean, basically, like, slap yourself, get over the excuses, and do this, right? Let's just do
Mhm.
this.
Yeah, I think there's a
Um,
tendency for people to spend so much more time thinking about all of the genetics and the diseases that they wish they had or didn't have, right? and like the reality of it is like life is unfair. Like go out and see what you can get done. Keep in mind that someone out there was born with no legs and they can do more pull-ups than you. So like maybe go work out, right? If you ever need motivation, just like look up Paralympic athletes and like people that like you
Yeah.
look at them, you're like, how are you even capable of doing
Yeah.
anything that you do? There's some people out there that are
Amen.
a lot worse off than you that are doing great things. So
For
try
sure.
harder,
A lot of
essentially.
times I realize when I feel woe is me for whatever reason, even if it's legitimate reason, I realize I got to get the focus off of me. I got to
Hmm.
realize I'm not the center of the universe and start looking around me. And there's always somebody else that could use help or is definitely in a situation more difficult than mine. Always, for sure.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, Also, on a positive note, I found a couple studies this week knowing I was going to be talking to you. I'm just going to tell everybody I'm going to leave links in the show notes because it's pretty cool. One study showed that people who do strength training at least 2 or 3 times a week have a reduction in symptoms of depression. Just
Oh yeah.
flat
Oh
out,
yeah.
boom, you're going to feel better. I mean, that's a
Hmm.
great reason to do it. And second study said that let me see here, women need to do less exercise than men to change their baseline for both aerobic and muscular, this study found. Is that something you would agree with? Have you heard this?
I've never seen the study. I see no reason why it wouldn't be true. Um, yeah, I honestly don't know.
I don't
I don't
know.
think
I
that's
found it
yeah.
interesting that, for women to sit around and say, "Oh, that's not my thing. That's more of a guy thing." I mean, hey, ladies, it might
Yeah.
even be easy for us in some
I will
extent, to some
definitely
degree.
say what I can confidently tell you is that there is no evidence ever to show that it's the opposite. So at the very
Okay.
least, it's an even playing
Yeah.
field. I would say the thing I'd be interested to see with that study is like the ages and the people they used because like there's like there's a general issue with like training science in general where the majority of studies are either done on super elite athletes or completely untrained individuals, and most
Mhm.
people don't really fit that category. So like
Yeah.
and like the trap you'll fall into is like if I give somebody who's never worked out before the worst program in the entire world, they're still going to get stronger, right? But like that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good program, and that's where some of the
Mhm.
research starts to get flawed. Of like they'll use untrained individuals. Everything works on untrained individuals, so that
Mm.
doesn't mean your
Mhm.
program is good. It just means that you had the perfect people to try it on, right? So like that's
Gotcha.
kind of what I would say there. But again, I see no reason why that wouldn't be true. I'm curious. I'll look it up and read into it. So,
Okay.
but
You can check
yeah,
out the show notes too, Kai.
yeah.
Okay, so where can listeners find you? Because I want to make sure everybody understands that this is something you actually do for anyone
Mhm.
who wants the motivation, who needs the help. Is it something they can do on, you were mentioning a short-term basis even?
Yeah, 100%.
That,
I think
okay.
again, I think education is like the biggest obstacle for most people. Like a lot of people, they walk into a gym the first time, or they never even get to the gym because they know what's inside of a gym and they know that they don't know how to use any of it, and it's horrible, and they don't want to do it. Um, like I think for most people it just comes down to that obstacle, and once they get past that, at the very least, it becomes a minor part of their life, right? Like a lot of people, even if they only go to the gym once a week, they're still going to see good things happen. But if you never go that
Mhm.
first time because you think you don't know what you're doing, I promise you, you'll
Mhm.
never ever know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. Like this is what I do. I take people who don't know anything about this. I teach them as much as I possibly, or rather, as much as they want to learn about any
Mhm.
facet of fitness. Like it really does depend on what people want to get better at, but that's what I'm here for, is just to teach people the things that they don't know. And again, like I said, in the meantime, give them the knowledge for free. Essentially, let them skip all the learning so that they're not making those mistakes in the beginning that like people like I did that learned it themselves make early on. So it's all correct
Mhm.
from the get go. And the farther you get into it, the education comes with that. And you start to realize, oh, that's why this is correct and that's why this worked. And then they can go off and live their happy life and be as strong as they want forever. Right.
Right.
But
Right. So what would you do for somebody who reaches out to you and says, "Hey, Kai, I need some motivation."
It
How do
depends
you
on what the goal is, right? I mean, like I said, for most people, I think people underestimate the motivation that comes with literally just having a plan laid out, right? So for a lot of people, I'm like, all right, cool, let's just write you a plan and see what you like, right? And then if that goes well, that goes well. For other people, it really is a mental thing of like they just don't have the motivation to improve in whatever aspect they want to, but they know the work that comes with that. And that's literally just where it comes to having conversations with people, potentially finding ways of training that they haven't trained before. Like I have clients a lot who like, they wanted to lose weight, so they came to the gym 2 hours a day and just walked on a treadmill, and they're like, this feels like I hate this. And I'm like, well, of course you do. That's the
Mhm.
most boring thing you can do, right? They don't realize that, but like I I'm not going to go walk on a treadmill for 2 hours either. That's horrible. Um,
Mhm.
but like, if I can find somebody like that and be like, all right, cool, let's take a look at your nutrition and make sure that what you're eating is actually helping you and isn't hindering you, and is helping with that energy levels and things like that. And then give you a strength training program, or teach you to resistance train, or teach you how to like jump rope recreationally, right? Like there's a million ways to train out there, and everyone has at least one that they like. And the reality of it is if you're not competing in a sport, they all work, right?
Mm,
So like
mm,
if you're not training for something specific, you can make the results that you want for most people off of any style of training, provided it's built the right way, right? So it's
mm.
less about the specific things that you're doing. It's more about the way in which you're doing them and executing correctly and putting it into a program that works. But that's really like what I do is for those people, I just find we try a ton of different modalities. We find the ones that they actually like, and then we build that into the program. And that's what helps them stay consistent. They do it long term, and that's where the results come from.
I love it. Now I know you do this in person with people, but folks can reach out to you from across the country, right? And you have an
Hmm.
app and you
Yep.
can send them, I don't know, however you do it, 3 times a week or whatever you do it. You send them
It's whatever they want.
details.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I essentially I run most of my training through an app called Trainerize, and essentially I just like it because it's very customizable, so I can put whatever I want in. But it's all video based training, so any exercise that I give somebody has a video. It has the sets and reps, and that video, depending on like what the exercise is either going to be like a detailed explanation or just like a quick video of how to do it. But like everything in there is included, right? So it's the exercise you're doing. It's the sets of each one. It's the reps of each one. It's the weight that I want you to use. It's the effort level that I want you to be at. It's the warm ups. It's the cool downs. It's the everything in between, right? So it's literally
Okay.
for an entire week, however many days you're planning on training, built around whatever goal you have. This is what you do, and it's laid out, right? And then the education part of that is you leave notes in there, you leave comments, I write back to you, I do calls, whatever else it is. I take that time to like anything that's in the program that's like I don't really understand why this is here, or hey, I love this, what does it do, right? That's where I get that
Mhm.
opportunity to do what I actually love doing and just teach people to do what I do, right?
Yep.
But yeah, I mean that's always the goal, is for it to be really fun and really easy so that you keep doing it for as long as it takes to get wherever you want to go. And my kind of like behind the curtain agenda is to make you do this for the rest of your life, right? Like I want people to finish training with me and continue to work out in some capacity literally forever, because there's no downside to that ever. But yeah.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. I know I'm really glad that I mean, I didn't even think about lifting weights of any kind until I was just remembering. Oh, many years ago, Kai made fun of me with my little, I think I had 2 pound weights that you were making fun of.
Well, I mean, let the record show 2 pound weights are great, right? However, like they're a great entry point. However, the context of this was you've been lifting these same 2 pound weights for like upwards of 10 years, right? I was like, surely you've gotten strong enough now to lift the two and a halfs or threes, right?
Well, to be fair, the 2 pounders were there for those tricep, literally 15 minutes of triceps that
Hmm.
I was doing. So I mean, you need to have a little weight for something like
I'll,
that.
I'll keep my opinions on 15 minutes of tricep
Okay.
extensions to myself,
Okay, I
but
know. Kai does not agree with
yeah,
them. I'll just tell you now, Kai does not. And I
yeah,
will tell you now that I'm going to the gym, I would much rather do 10 reps on the cable for my triceps than to do 15 minutes with my little
it's a
weight.
lot more
So I'm
fun.
I'm with you on that. I actually
That's
agree.
again, that's the thing of like, even I feel like I'm gonna say like, putting my expert hat on, there is not a reason to be doing 15 minutes of tricep kickbacks, right? Like
Mhm,
it's not scientifically sound. Um,
mm,
if it was, let's hypothetically say that doing 10 reps on a cable tricep extension was as good or almost as good as doing 15 minutes of tricep kickbacks with 2 pound weights. Which one of those are you realistically going to continue doing long term? Right. So that's
right,
where I'm looking at like, I want to make a program for you that's like not the worst thing you've ever had to do in your entire life, because I want you to get the
right,
results. Like I think there's this
right.
tendency where like people think that like trainers just want people to have a bad day, right? And that's not the case. Like I'm never looking like I want this to suck for you as much as possible. I'm
Right,
always
right.
looking at I want this to do everything it can for you, and I want it to be done in the easiest possible way, right? Because if it's easy and it does good things for you, you're going to do it, right? And that's all I need, right? Is consistency.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, the difference between the clients that have success and the clients that don't is whether or not they actually do it, right? And every once in a while, you will run into somebody who like they just don't care. They think they care, but you'll give them a program and they don't care enough about what they need to do to go and get it done. And if you never even set foot in the gym, it will not work for you, right? That really is
Mhm.
it. Like, or not even in the gym, but if you never do that first rep, you are not going to get anywhere. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
people need to come to terms with. But that's where, on my end, it's about making it not seem like an insurmountable task, right? Because if I put go do this 5 times on this cable versus go do 30 minutes of this, it's a lot more likely that you'll go do your 5 reps on the
Yeah.
cable, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'd say there.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. This has been fun. Thank you, Kai, for
Mhm.
agreeing to come on and encourage us. And where can people, you still haven't told people where they can find you. Where can people find you?
I'll have a Google sheet for any like inquiries or anything like that that I'll have in there. We'll put a link for that, and then on Instagram, I'm Cai Hepner, like the name, CAIHEPNER underscore WSJ for World's Strongest Junior. I'm sure we'll have that somewhere too.
Yep.
But that's my
Okay.
Instagram. That's
Yeah.
basically it's some educational content. It's a good bit of educational content, some videos, exercise demos, things like that. That's a great way
I
for
mean,
like if
let's
people
be
just don't.
real, Kai. It's a good bit of Kai lifting heavy
I was
things,
gonna
is
say
what
that's
your
the other thing is
Instagram is.
if you wanna watch me pick up some weirdly shaped objects, that's on there too.
It's
But no,
true.
there is
It's true.
definitely yeah. That's where I would
Yeah.
say like if
So
you
those,
don't know anything about this, that's where you can like at least see like an exercise demo and be like, oh, that's what resistance training is, right?
Mhm.
But yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, but for those listeners out there who you're just looking for some, the personal trainer who's going to help you with your personal physical goals, Kai's the guy. You don't even have to be at the gym and you don't have to be into watching strongman lifting. Kai,
Uh,
seriously, I love it that you take this all very, not only seriously, but passionately. You love what you do, it
mhm.
shows. And I would encourage anybody who's on the fence about maybe Kai could help me to reach out. I'm going to have links in the show notes. You can reach out to me and you can find Kai at CAI Hepner underscore WSJ on Instagram. So thanks, Kai. This has been fun.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, friends. I want to encourage you to go to solelyrested.com/podcast and sign up for the weekly email so I can send you each episode and all the links that we refer to. So if you are getting the email for this episode, those studies that Kai and I talked about at the end, I'll send you the links to them directly so you can check them out yourself. Go to solelyrested.com/podcast. And there you can sign up to get those emails. Also, it's where to go to see what other platforms you can listen to this on. And there's a description there of how you can leave a review. I would love to see your 5-star review, letting me know your thoughts on this episode or the show in general. So solelyrested.com/podcast, SOULY rested.com/podcast. Okay, thanks for listening. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Michelle Visser. I'm a former processed food junkie turned real food enthusiast. 10 years ago, our family left the rat race, moved to the country, started growing and raising some of our own food, and intentionally simplified some things. A few things were really hard for me to figure out. And after long learning curves and too many mistakes to count, I gradually mastered things like making maple syrup, making our own kombucha, dehydrating most of our garden's harvest, and milling our own flour. I poured everything I learned into a few resources that I've created just for you. So ditch the learning curve and dive into your real food goals armed with the tips and the tricks and the insights that I wish I knew a decade ago. Go to solelyrested.com/learn, LEARN, SOULY rested.com/learn. Find out about those resources I'm talking about and dive in, get rid of the learning curve, and start really making this the year that you're serious about more real food. Thanks for listening, guys.